Why did you start in electrical engineering way back when? What drew you to that field?
So when I was growing up on a farm, again, this was pre 80s. I was obsessed with electricity, and I just remember my father. He had these tractors and he had these radios on these older tractors, and invariably they would break down, and he would give them to me, and I would rip them apart, trying to understand how they worked. And then, believe it or not, I there was a bookstore, or a bike store and Radio Shack in the little town that I grew up near. And Radio Shack was the internet for me. You could buy books on electronics, on just the components, and they would sell them. They would have these little projects you could build. And I think I owe my career to Radio Shack, believe it or not.
I loved Radio Shack growing up myself as well. And then you started your career in electrical engineering. It seemed like it was a very organic process. You had a lot of interest in that way back when, growing up in the farm, which is really, really cool. And then at some point in your career, you pivoted from electrical engineering to software engineering. So what inspired that pivot? How did it feel like learning the whole new world of software engineering? And did it take you a while to ramp up, or was it kind of natural? You're using the same kind of brain that you did for electrical engineering. You applied that same muscle to software. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, for starters, this what I call writing software was more along the lines of signal processing. So I guess you could say I was an expert in the wireless industry, or in both hardware and signal processing software. So the very specific type of software I would write would be more signal processing, demodulation of wireless signals, modulation of wireless signal, channel encoding, channel decoding. So it was specifically around signal processing software that I did write.
And how was that different, or how did you feel about that versus your first job in electrical engineering? When you joined electrical engineering, did you see or think at that time, this is my career for the long run, or you somehow developed into the world of signal processing and wireless, and like, wow, this is something that I'm now really passionate about. I can see myself doing this for a very long time.
How do I say it? There's a fine line between doing hardware development and then doing signal processing software development. And it's almost writing, and I did a lot of assembly code as well. Back in the 90s, this was before you used to write signal processing code on, let's say demodulators or modems. You used to write a lot of assembly code to do these, the demodulators or the channel encoders. And so it wasn't a giant leap for me to go from the hardware world into the software world, given the type of software world, that I was writing. Now, I do see, you've got, front end and back end and full stack developers. I have no idea as to what they're doing. So that is not I understand the jargon but it is a million miles away from those types of software engineers. I would write, more just signal processing, finite impulse response filters. But, part of it was, okay, how long does filter have to be? Can I do it, in a fixed point implementation? It was a lot of hardware and software development. That's when I look at signal processing software, God, it's been so long since I've talked about this. It was both, and it was kind of fun in that it was, developing software, but there was a very, very, very mathematical part of it in terms of, and I go back to that. I need a filter. What type of filter am I going to use? How is it going to affect my performance of my demodulator? And I would spend a lot of time, looking at just the algorithm as to how it's going to be done, more so than actually implementing the software.
For someone that's owned multiple businesses, what do you get the inspiration from? I'm sure like even now, you can't help a part of your brain just always cranking out new ideas, right? So like what inspires you to generate new ideas? And then what makes you internally determine, oh, this is actually a good idea and I should go for it, for someone who's done like 6 businesses?
I guess what inspires me to do it? I guess I've been fortunate that I have the opportunity to do it.
Mm.
It's not as risky as you think it is. Like, for example, I had two kids, and my wife was a full-time, she was taking care of my kids full time. And I, I'm sitting at Motorola, and I'm going to leave Motorola perfectly great. It was a great job. I was making good money. I had insurance. But then I'm like, I have 3 months of work. So this is going to last at least 3 months. And, it took us about 2 weeks to get 3 months worth of contracts. And at the time, I'm like, okay, I can last 3 months. And I knew that, talking with my boss before I left, or this guy I knew at Motorola who's pretty pious, said, hey, I'm going to do this. And if I fail, will you hire me back? He said, absolutely, go knock yourself out. So I guess, people think he's a risk taker. I knew that regardless of what path I went down, I would always land on my feet.
Seemed like it. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it looked like you were just hedging, right? So like as a worst case plan B, if all else fails, you can get your original job back. I think that's awesome. I think for a lot of people, they think that if they made that jump, their job wouldn't accept them back if they come running back, right? So I think it doesn't happen for everybody, but you create a situation for yourself where it just made sense to take the plunge.
Yeah, like you say, I'll give the example. You seem like a pretty smart guy. And
Appreciate it.
And if you run off and do some crazy idea, trust me, you're gonna get a job. You will not have a problem getting another job. So, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And the other thing too is I guess I look at 20-year memories where 20 years from now, you want to look back and laugh and say, I can't believe I did that. That was wild. That was a lot of fun, though.
I mean, I
So,
can't believe one of your business ideas were oil rigs. I guess it makes sense, telecommunication to oil rigs. I don't even know how you stumbled into that world, but and sorry for talking about this for a lot longer than expected, but it's just rare for me to just talk to people that owned and ran as many businesses as you. I think that's really inspirational. I think that's really, really well. I huge tons of respect as I know a lot of work has gone into that. Two more personal questions. I'm just honestly personally curious. So the subsequent companies that you founded, were some of them with you from day one, maybe in your first or second business, and then you repeated starting multiple businesses with them as the same co-founders type of thing, or did you kind of have like a different team for every business, like just moving forward?
well, okay. So let me start with the first in terms of ideas, if they were always with me. And, the answer to that is no. Well, I'll give you the 640 Labs, how that company came to be. I worked at John Deere on theirs. It's this Green Star display. It's this display that is in every John Deere tractor. I worked on that. And then years later, Apple released this iPad, and I saw this iPad and I looked at it and I'm like, this is what the Green Star display should have been. And, it's got all the memory in the world. Graphics are unbelievable. Kids are playing video games on them. You can read your email. You can watch a movie on it. It's got battery powered. It's got cellular. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got Bluetooth. It's got all these accessories. And this is the coolest thing in the world. And then I look at what I designed at Deere, and I'm like, this would totally kill it. Why is this being used in agriculture? And so I carried that idea around with me for a number of years, in that, you have this iPad. And so then you have to get data into this iPad. So I made this little device. At the time, it was called the 640 Drive. Now it's called the FieldView Drive. Most farmers know what that is. And we started a company based around that idea, myself and a friend. Every year we went snowmobiling in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Over some beers one night, we just decided that the two of us, that we're going to start a company. It's going to be a data analytics company, and we're going to use an iPad. So that was 640 Labs. That was the birth of that company.
And I love it. That's awesome. Can I ask you, so for someone who built multiple businesses before, some of them were even self-funded, right? Completely bootstrapped, which is awesome. How does it feel like, as now a seasoned founder, to run a company that's venture backed? Does it does it add an extra element of stress, like that you've never experienced before, or perhaps another level of complexity, or even maybe fun, because now you have things like boardrooms and investors and VCs that you have to deal with? Like, or is it something that you just, you weren't prepared for at all and just kind of caught you by surprise? Like, what has your experience been so far?
I can tell you, so this is the biggest lie I think I was told. For years and years and years, you would always hear these stories about, oh, if you get a venture capitalist or a vulture capitalist, they're going to be god awful. The boards are terrible. It's just going to be, they're going to make you jump through hoops. You won't believe just how bad it is when you go out and you take money from a VC, blah blah blah. Right. And I believed it. And I can tell you that is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard. I actually adore my board. At the end of the day, they want this to succeed. Right. And they are some of the most helpful people. They will answer the phone whenever I call them. If I have a question about such and such, I don't know this, they're happy to explain. I would go to board meetings. The first board meeting, I was like, oh my God, a little nervous and that, how am I going to do? Am I going to do good enough? Blah, blah, blah. And then I soon realized that after every board meeting, I'm invigorated. I think I wish I could have a board meeting every week because they really, really help me. And I rely on my board. I have weekly calls with the chairperson of the board, of my board, Daphne Prius. Call her out. She's absolutely remarkable, and she's got this legal. She's very disciplined. She's awesome. And that Kirsten Stead from Data Collective, she's just awesome too. She's got that West Coast go go go. And then I have now I have John Perriam out of Fulcrum, out of Kansas City, and he is great as well. Very legal minded, and he's just very helpful. So I wish every company I had a board of directors.
Wow. I mean, that is refreshingly honest and insightful. And I appreciate you sharing. And it seemed like you just had best experience you could ask for when it comes to VCs and boards. And I think that's amazing. And I'm really, really happy for you and the team. I think that's fantastic. So I guess the outlook, just moving forward, like what do you think is the future of farming? I know, as I kind of mentioned before, the farm just land in general is facing a lot of different threats. Obviously, farming has their own industry specific threats. Like what do you see as the future of farming in this country? And do you think it's here to stay, or it's an existential crisis? Like, what are your thoughts?
So I have a variety of thoughts. Let me start with, I think, the biggest problem in agriculture today. What that is, there's just a little over 3 million farmers in the United States. 1/3 of them are over the age of 65. And farmers die with their boots on. Let's have an uncomfortable conversation. 12 years from now, CDC hasn't pegged at 77 years old. So 12 years from now, 1/3 of the farmers we know in the United States are going to be gone. And then what's scary is another third of the 3 million are between the ages of 55 and 65. So 22 years from now, 2/3 of the farmers we know today are going to be gone. It's just not an occupation that you could that the young can go into, primarily because it's very, very capital intensive. And I always joke that every guidance counselor in the United States should, or they say, you can be anything you want in this world but a farmer. I don't care what you're worth, Preston, but you could not become a farmer. It's just too capital intensive. And so I don't know what the solution to that is, but I think that you're going to start seeing pods, if you will, farms on the order of, let's say, 2,500 acres, and they're going to be completely optimized for capital and labor. And I could see a world where there's one person who's responsible for 2,500 acres, and then they have smaller equipment, less costly, and completely optimized for that 2,500 acres.
And I can see how the product and solution you're building right now can perhaps fit quite well within that scenario. What would be one advice that you would want to give to the audience from your experience so far?
There's a lot of people that you have worked with throughout your career, as long as it may have been, maybe you're 5 years out of college, but there are a lot of people out there that are just willing to help in anything you want to do. And just remember that if you need any help, there's plenty of people out there that are more than willing to help in any endeavor. And leverage all your people in your network. Don't be afraid to call them. They're more than happy to help you, give you
I
advice and whatnot.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that. I think it's very easy, even if you're like just a professional or especially a founder, to feel alone and you have to figure it out by yourself. And if you reach out, no one's going to respond back to you. But I think this human, positive, warm feedback, like you can always find someone willing to help you, give you a hand, I think is one that people should be aware of and should talk about more, especially in the industry. So I really want to thank you for that.